Hi, this is Anna Bevan Gravely with NCFREE, and I'm joined by Representative Perrin Jones, who is running for re-election in House District 9. Representative, thanks so much for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to share with our members before we get started?
Well, Anna, thanks for having me. I appreciate your taking the time to speak with me. I know we were trying to kind of coordinate an interview back during session, and that just didn't work out. So I appreciate your giving me the time to come back and speak with you and your audience.
Yeah.
A little bit about me. I'm an anesthesiologist by training. I've been practicing in Greenville since 2003. I was appointed to finish out the term that was vacated, or the seat that was vacated when Greg Murphy ran and won his House race for the U.S. House. So I've been in the State House since September. Actually, I think I was sworn in on October the 1st of last year. By way of background, I was born in Greensboro. I grew up in Charlotte. I went to Chapel Hill. Then I went to Wake Forest for medical school, and then I did my residency up at Dartmouth, up in New Hampshire. And again, I've been practicing in Greenville since 2003. I've been married to my wife, Laura, since 1996. We have three wonderful children who are 18, 16, and 13. My oldest just graduated from high school and is getting ready to go off to Chapel Hill in the fall. And that's
Awesome.
That's, a little bit about me.
All the teens you have there.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a crazy house.
Yeah.
It's a crazy house.
Awesome.
Who would ever have three teenagers at one time?
That is a lot to have it at one time, for sure. Yeah. So good job. Yeah. We'll just dive into the questions.
Sure.
Have you ever owned a business or been in a management position in a business?
I have, and I do currently. I am a practice in, I'm a partner in our medical practice, East Carolina Anesthesia Associates. We are currently, I believe, the largest anesthesia practice in the state of North Carolina. We cover roughly 40 different clinical sites around the state and employ somewhere around 270 or so providers, both physicians, mid-level anesthesia providers, as well as administrative staff. We just opened up our first location out of state, which is up in the Tidewater area of Virginia. And, I've been a partner in that practice since 2005. So, people that aren't familiar with the practice of medicine, private practice of medicine, you really are wearing two hats all the time, or more than two, maybe three. You've got your medical hat, so you're in actually taking care of people. But then you have to think about running a small business. So an independent medical practice like ours is absolutely a small business. We have to think about our employees, acquiring employees, retaining our employees, employee benefits, our overhead costs, costs to provide the service, and all the same types of issues that you would have with any other small business. I've been on our practice's local executive committee since 2005. And when we started to grow our footprint across the state, we created essentially a super board, which had representatives from all the different practice locations we have around the state. And I've been on our super board as well since it was founded about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Would you say that the current level of state and federal taxation is too high, too low, or just about right?
Well, I personally would always like to see taxes go down. I mean, that's just my personal inclination, is to see taxes go down. I am definitely more of a person that thinks we ought to have a lower taxation policy, both personally as well as for corporations, because I think that makes the United States more competitive, and quite frankly, I think it makes people more free. We need to have a certain level of taxation because there is a certain amount of revenue that must be generated to perform essential government services. But beyond that, I think people ought to be able to keep what they earn. And that's just my feeling about it. There have been some changes here recently to the personal and the corporate tax rates, both in the United States as well as in North Carolina. I would love to see those rates come down to a level that funds government, but doesn't necessarily overfund it.
Yeah, interesting. Do you feel it's appropriate for state or local governments to offer incentives to private businesses in consideration of locating, expanding, or conducting business in a particular part of the state?
Well, that's a great question. On the one hand, providing incentives is very important, I guess, because it can help bring businesses to parts of the state that have not seen as much economic growth as other parts. I live in Greenville, and frankly, the eastern part of the state, so east of say 95, and quite frankly, a lot of parts of the state that are west of 77 have not seen as much economic growth as the Wake counties, the Mecklenburg counties, Guilford, and some of the other ones that are connected via I-85. So being able to provide incentives for businesses to relocate to those areas, I think would be incredibly effective if they actually are able to bring a business in, help grow the tax base, help grow the economic base, help employ people. If they actually do what they say they'll be able to do, then I guess it would probably all in a positive. But those can also end up being kind of a race to the bottom. So if you have one state that's competing against another state with incentives, then essentially those two states are kind of negotiating against one another, and that could end up being counterproductive if the incentives get to be too large. So I think you really have to look at the individual project that you're referring to and try to take all those kind of things into account before you can make a statement about any one project versus another. But something like that is very difficult, I think, to make just a blanket statement about all economic incentive programs.
Yeah. Describe your personal opinion as to what the key principles of free enterprise are.
Well, personally, I think that personal freedom and economic freedom are two sides of the same coin. And so I think that we ought to encourage people to go out and be entrepreneurs and be successful in life. If someone wants to start a business, I think they should absolutely be able to do that as long as it is legal, ethical, and moral. And inside of those three provisions, I think we ought to do everything we can to encourage that type of activity. I'm a big proponent that our job really in the State House is to kind of frame what we think a civil society is. And I think that being able to maintain, preserve, and then pass on the essence of a civil society is incredibly important. Economic liberty is very important to be able to maintain that civil society. And again, I think that is the flip side to the personal freedoms that we're able to enjoy here in the United States.
Yeah. In your opinion, and you're in a very unique position to be able to look at this from a different perspective. In your opinion, what is the appropriate balance in the scope of federal and state regulatory requirements on business? And what, in your opinion, is the best way to balance the appropriate protections without impugning economic vitality?
Well, that's another great question. So, regulations are, to a point, I think, a necessary evil almost. A concern that I have with regulations is that they can end up having the same impact as law. However, they don't go through the same level of scrutiny necessary, or they don't necessarily go through the same level of scrutiny that an idea would go through if it were to become a law. So you can have an insidious creep of regulation on businesses that can end up really being very stifling. And if those regulations aren't reviewed from time to time and either updated or removed, quite frankly, then you have restrictions that are placed on business that really are either antiquated or otherwise irrelevant. And quite frankly, when people see that, it I think it breeds a little bit of cynicism because they see policies or regulations that are in place that really just don't make sense anymore. And then they try to go and get changes made. And oftentimes the bureaucracy for that to occur is overwhelming. So it just breeds kind of a certain amount of cynicism because it seems like government isn't really keeping up with the times. So kind of like with taxation, I personally think that a lower regulatory environment is incredibly important for a number of reasons. But obviously, you have to have some protections in place because you don't want people to do things that are going to be overtly damaging either to the environment or to, our moral standards or ethical standards or legal standards. So,
yeah. So if you win in November, what would be your top 3 priorities as it pertains to the business community?
Well, so
you can narrow it down. Just if you can narrow it down.
What's that?
If you can narrow it down, then go for it.
Well, so going into this, my biggest thing, was looking obviously at the medical community because that's really important. But more broadly than that, it was really looking at how we can grow the economies of counties that are east of 95 and west of 77, places that are more rural parts of North Carolina. And then this little thing called COVID came along, and that sort of upset the apple cart. So, the priorities now, in my opinion, are, figuring out a way that we can safely and broadly reopen our economy. And to my mind, that means that we need to get an effective testing, track, and tracing program up and running so that we can detect areas where disease is present and we can mitigate the spread. And we can, offer some safeguards and protections for people so that they can get back out to work and, we can, reopen our economy.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time. And I've really enjoyed learning more about you and your background and your priorities. Yeah.
Can I interject one more?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So I've been thinking about this a lot, with coronavirus and what it's done to the economy. And quite frankly, I think within the United States, the coronavirus could end up really reshuffling the deck in terms of which states have incredibly strong economies and which ones don't. So I would kind of throw out the challenge to people around the state that if we can come out near the top in terms of our response and our recovery efforts, I think that it's going to put North Carolina on a trajectory to be an economic powerhouse, and within the United States for the foreseeable future. So that's something that we need to, that's a challenge I hope we can all take up, Republicans, Democrats alike, and really push the state forward in a positive fashion so that we can come out of this economically more in a stronger fashion than we were going into it.
Yeah, that's a great thought and perspective. Before we close and end our time together, where can our members go to learn more about you?
Shameless self-promotion.
Absolutely, do it.
So my website is www.perrinjonesmd.com. It's kind of weird because I've never had a website before. You can find me on Facebook, and I believe my page is just Perrin Jones MD is on Facebook, and I've got an Instagram account that's also Perrin Jones MD. So if anybody wants to take a look and let me know. I'd love to hear from you. You can contact me via personal messenger or my legislative email address, and I'd love to hear from you.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I hope you have a great rest of the day, and good luck on the campaign trail.
Appreciate it. Hope you have a good day and a good weekend.
Thanks.